Welcome to Beyond the Office, Building and Leading Remote Teams. I'm your host, Bill Keller. And on today's episode, we have Ryan Lazanis. He's the founder of Future Firm. And if you don't know, Future Firm is a firm that helps and coaches business owners in the accounting space to have freedom and to build the life that they've always dreamed of through their firms. And on today's episode, we are going to talk about a wide range of issues, whether that's AI in accounting, building remote teams, hiring, and where the future of accounting is headed. And so if you like this type of content about building and leading remote teams, like and subscribe. And now for today's episode. Well, Ryan, it's great to have you on the show today. How are you?
Bill, thank you very much. Doing great. How about yourself?
I can't complain. I had a little late flight yesterday. Got in at 4 this morning. It's a 1 in the afternoon, but I'm excited for this. And so I am stoked to have you on the show. And I think we'll have a great time together.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it.
So you're with Future Firm now. You're the founder of Future Firm. And could you tell everybody a little bit about what your kind of goal, your mission, and what kind of impact you want to have in the world through that firm and where you're headed?
Yeah, so my background is I'm a CPA born and raised in Montreal, Canada. I started one of the earliest online accounting firms in North America over 10 years ago. Started it from scratch and fell into all the typical pitfalls you could possibly make as a first-time business owner, trying to operate a new kind of business model in the accounting world, and eventually, figured out the system to take that took the firm from scratch all the way to acquisition in just 5 years. It was acquired by a large corporate services firm based out of the Isle of Man, which was quite a unique experience. And immediately after transitioning the business over to them, I launched Future Firm to be the resource I wish I always had when running my firm, a resource that I could lean on to help me avoid the common pitfalls and traps that most firm owners make. And ultimately, Future Firm is a part media company where we have a blog, a podcast, a newsletter providing actionable, practical, free tips and tricks for firm owners around the globe to help them scale their business and reduce their workload. But it's also a coaching company, and we have an online coaching program called Future Firm Accelerate, which launched around 3.5 years ago. We have over 800 students from around the globe actively in the program that are looking to scale their firm, systematize it, and live a life of freedom. They get access to self-paced training. They get access to coaching when they need more help, and they get access to an amazing community of like-minded firm owners that they can tap into whenever they need more help. And really what we're trying to do is help firm owners live a life of freedom, help them have more flexibility in their life, have more freedom in their life so that I can actually step away from the business, enjoy time with their family, with their friends, their hobbies. Yeah, basically just help them live a life of freedom.
Well, I know I've been enjoying your videos. You have a lot of free content out there on the web, and I'm sure your coaching program is amazing. I've learned a lot actually as going through these videos. As a learner myself, I'm always seeking new knowledge and things that I didn't know before. And so I appreciate all that you're putting out there, because it is some good stuff. And so I would encourage people to check that out. You talk about, this freedom to live an incredible life, but most people talk about success, earning money, increasing profitability, but very rarely do they talk about freedom nearly as much as what I'm hearing you say is, why does that drive you? Why is that so important to you?
It really boils down to, when I started Future Firm, I created it from the ground up to give myself and my team freedom, so we were talking a little bit before we pressed record here, and my wife lives in Indonesia, and we have brutal winters here in Montreal, Canada. And I wanted to create a business model that lets me transport myself to a much warmer part of the year for a couple months of the year and not skipping a beat when it comes to the business. So I really created this from the ground up for freedom and flexibility, clearing my calendar as much as possible and just being able to do whatever I want to do. If I want to go on 4 or 5 vacations a year, which I tend to do, I want to have a business that can support that. So really starting with the end in mind and reverse engineering the plan to get there. That's something that was very important for me when I started my second business. I didn't really have that thought process when I started my first business. I think a lot of people lack that thought process as well when they start their first business. It's really more growth for the sake of growth, more clients, more revenues, more team members. We kind of lose sight of what's really important. When I started Future Firm and our Future Firm Accelerate program, I had the chance to speak to hundreds of different firm owners as they were entering into our coaching program. And what they told me is, for the most part, is they're content with the amount of money they're making, to live the kind of lifestyle they want. For the most part, obviously, they're not going to say no to more. But what they really need help with is detaching themselves from the business and being able to take that vacation where they don't have to bring their laptop with them or check their phone every couple hours. Being able to spend those special moments with their family or their child. There's so many stories that I hear from firm owners where, their wife, is giving birth and they're doing a tax return in the hospital room or stuff like that. So like, these are the things that are actually really important in life that we want to be present for. And ultimately, that's the big theme of Future Firm and our Future Firm Accelerate program, is help you live a life of freedom. And obviously that includes financial freedom as well.
That is awesome, because so many times I would call myself a serial entrepreneur. Started when I was I think 21, and was always interested in business since I was probably less than 10. And but most people, everybody's focused all on the money, but not really. And nobody really, I've told my team, nobody really wants money. You want what money can buy. And oftentimes, if you can gain freedom of mobility, freedom of location, you can do a whole lot more with what you have.
Totally agree, Bill.
So you talk about, helping people to build this firm of the future. How exactly, do you have, like, what's the formula in your mind? Is it difficult, or is it just like many things, it's simple, but it's not easy?
I think business in general is one of the hardest things out there. Having a really good business is not an easy thing to put in place. There's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that are required. I think it's easier than ever today, though, to create a great business because we have so many resources that we can surround ourselves with, right? It's very easy to connect with people. It's very easy to connect with communities. We have unlimited information online at our fingertips. We have a system inside Future Firm Accelerate. It's a step-by-step system that you can follow to create a systematized, scalable firm that you can step away from. So we have that system. I don't know if I'm kind of answering your question head on or not, but creating any kind of business is tough. But with the right system in place and with the right support network, I think it's easier than ever.
I love that, systematized, making sure that you have the systems, and then you're running, rather than you have a team. And of course, you want a good team, but you really need a good system, and then have your team run that system.
I think we see totally eye to eye there. Mm-hmm. I think for me, this systematization of an accounting firm really starts at what we're offering our clients, how we're packaging it, how we're productizing our services. The professional services industry, it's a tough business to scale. It's not too difficult when you got, a couple clients, but if you have hundreds of clients, it becomes very difficult to scale due to the unique nature of every single client that we're dealing with. And a lot of firm owners have trouble with that. If we can turn our offers into packages and we can put all of our clients onto those similar packages, that's when the systematization begins, in my opinion. I think that's the most important part of a systematized firm, is having a good packaging strategy with all of our clients fitting into those packages.
So curious, because you mentioned packages and systematization. We are filming this right after the new year in 2025, and right before the new year, some news came out regarding bench accounting and their closure with like 35,000 clients. And just curious how you see that impacting kind of like the accounting industry going forward, because they were innovative in many ways. And there's kind of been this debate, I think, back and forth is this tech, is this AI, what's going to take over accounting, or is it really just all about people and small accounting firms? How do you see this kind of playing out in the future?
So I've been following this side of things for many years now. And I think one of the, I started Future Firm as a blog, really, just kind of journaling my thoughts, journaling my experience, giving tips and tricks and talking about things happening in the industry. And one of the blog posts that really put Future Firm on the map when I started it was a blog post called will accounting tech startups overtake your firm? And that's when all these, like this VC money was coming into the industry with Pilot, with Bench, with Scale Factor, with a whole bunch of them. And I've long looked up to Bench and some of these others because I think they understand how to approach the customer experience. I think they understand how to approach marketing these types of services in this day and age. I think they do a lot of things right. I just don't think they have the business model. A lot of them just didn't understand the business model, and a lot of them talked about automation doing a lot of the heavy lifting when in reality behind the scenes it was a lot of manual work. Not to mention Bench in particular, I suspect their pricing, so they might have had good packaging, like some of our blog posts have referred to their packaging strategy, but they had poor pricing. They raised a ton of money. They were burning through a lot of money. They had a massive team in place of hundreds and hundreds of employees. They had their proprietary software to handle the books. So they had a lot of capital required, a lot of expenditure, and they had an ultra low pricing strategy. And I just didn't see how that was ever going to work, truthfully. I think they started at $150 a month, and then you go onto their website right now, it's like $299 a month for like full-fledged bookkeeping. It's not sustainable with that kind of cost structure, in my opinion, no matter what sort of volume you're doing. So I just think the failure probably came from the poor pricing strategy. So they had good packaging, they were able to productize it. So they probably had a formula that was rinse and repeat to get clients in the door and into the routine service delivery, but they had a poor pricing strategy, in my opinion. I think that's where it probably fell apart.
My guess would have been also that they might have been pricing for AI to take over and just hoping that it could get there. And as I think both of us would agree, it's not quite there yet. There's elements that we can automate, but there's certainly still the human element. I don't know how long it's going to take, what that exponential curve is, but I am curious about this because obviously our focus here on this podcast is about building remote teams, but as AI comes in, I almost kind of see that as another team member in many ways, or an augmentation to your current team. And so really we're talking a lot about that on this program, because that I believe is going to be key moving forward. Because if you're not using automation, you're going to have some serious uphill challenges. Maybe you can just keep lowering your rate, as people become more efficient using AI. And if you're not using it, maybe you're willing to do that. But I think basically you're just waiting to die. So I'm just curious, how do you see, and people might like to know, in Future Firm, I believe you have 15 remote staff all over the world, and which is amazing. How do you see AI kind of fitting in with them in the next year or two? What do you see happening there?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly don't see it as a replacement. I see it as an augment. I see it as a complement. Anyone that thinks they're going to be able to, replace individuals to handle, a lot of the service delivery work, I think we still got a ways to go there for a variety of reasons. I think it's worth playing around with and understanding the technology, though. Generative AI, Chat GPT, these sorts of things. I think what's really interesting is we're always trying to duplicate ourselves. You sometimes hear business owners say, if only I could duplicate myself, and I have something great on my hands. I think we're very close to that happening. And in fact, that's something I've been personally playing around with. And as a feature in our Future Firm Accelerate program, we just launched very recently, something I call Ryan Bot. So there's a lot of people that want coaching from me, and I don't do one-to-one coaching anymore. But we're able to train AI to talk like us, sound like us, speak like us. If we can get whatever is in our head out into the system and train it in terms of how we typically interact with people, which is what I did with this Ryan bot, then we can in some ways duplicate ourselves. And then, we look at, I'm a big proponent of the gold, silver, bronze type offerings, the 3-tiered approach. So you could have these digital AI clones providing support to clients or customers on your base tier, as an example. And on your premium tiers, you can provide, the unlimited access to yourself as another extreme. So maybe I'm taking this conversation in a different direction here, but I'm excited about these types of capabilities and how some of the more modern, forward-thinking firms out there can leverage them to their advantage.
It's amazing what's happening and how quickly it's happening. And I think that with everybody having access to ChatGPT, the difference is going to be in proprietary data. That is you in your particular case. Having that proprietary data, having your knowledge, and being able to then utilize a large language model in conjunction with that data is really powerful. And so I would agree that people should start to be thinking about, what is your data? What data do you actually have that you can leverage? And most people are like, I don't have any data, because they think of data and they're thinking, oh, I have all these data points from like Walmart or on consumer behavior, but you have a lot of knowledge and a lot of data that you might be able to leverage. And so I think that's great advice. So on the team side, can you give us some helpful hints and tips as far as how do you build a good remote team, and how do you continue to support them long term?
I think it's the same principle building a remote team than you would build a non-remote team. We have to find good people. We have to attract good people. We have to land them on our team. We have to properly onboard them and train them and support them. And I think that's what a lot of people think about is, okay, well, I have a local team and now I have an offshore team, and it's going to be completely different. And really, I mean, for me, it wasn't real. I didn't really skip a beat. I did have an onshore team when I had my firm, Zen Accounting. We were virtual pretty early on, and I was hiring people across the country where we were operating virtually. When I launched Future Firm, I started offshoring to other countries. And the only thing that I think you do have to be aware of is some of the cultural differences, and be a little bit more sensitive to that. There are some nuances there. Like, for instance, we have a portion of our team in the Philippines, and there are certain cultural traits. Perhaps they're not as outspoken as someone in US or Canada would be. Perhaps they're not as blunt. Perhaps they take things a different way, so you have to be kind of in tune to that. And I imagine that's where you kind of help out as well, Bill, is maybe perhaps training some of that offshore team, or communicating to some of the firms you're dealing with about how you might want to be interacting with some of these individuals. I'm not sure, but I think that's, again, maybe I took this answer in a different direction, but I think that's the big thing when you're dealing with offshore is we're dealing with different cultures. They're still people, we're not treating them like machines or robots. They're people. And the one thing that we have to be more in tune with is bridging the cultures together.
Absolutely. And one of the books that I like is called Foreign to Familiar. Don't know if you've ever heard of that before.
No, I have not.
It's a great book about hot and cold climate cultures, where a lot of Latin cultures would be hot climate cultures. Cold climate cultures would be US, or at least a good portion of the US. The southern part of the US is more of a warm climate culture. Mm-hmm. And you go over to like Germany and Europe, more cold climate cultures, more task oriented, whereas the warm climate cultures are more relationship oriented.
That's interesting.
And in doing so, how you respond in the way that you respond. So for example, and I'm sure you probably see this, you go overseas, you're basically treated like royalty. Mm-hmm. But at the same time you think, oh, what could be bad about that? But at the same time they would be hesitant to perhaps bring you bad news. And so you really need some of that cultural understanding to be able to take your teams to the next level, because you want to, by understanding them better, you're going to be able to elicit better responses. You're going to be able to make sure that, we're all on the same page, because they want to do a good job. I found that, across the board, people, nobody comes in and says, hey, I want to screw over my employer. Now maybe they do that in the States or in Canada, but I don't see that overseas. And, are they always as effective as we would want them to be? No. But that's generally on me or on our team. And so that's what we do, is we have coaches actually who help them to bridge that culture gap on both sides, both with the people, the clients that hire our team, and also our team members as we train them. So I'm doing coaching with them twice per week. I have two 10-minute meetings in the morning just to kind of introduce them to different ideas, help them to grow. I actually have a twofold mission in life: to give people opportunities and help them to grow. And it's one of the reasons I work overseas, because I believe I can make an outsized influence in people's lives. Here in the United States and in Canada, I think if you want to learn, if you want opportunities, you can get them. They're generally there. It might take a little bit of searching, but for a lot of people overseas, they don't really have those opportunities, and many people are desiring that, and I love the fact that I can be a part of their growth.
I think that's very important. And I probably could have shortcut things quite a bit when I started Future Firm because, the first few people that I had brought on, I didn't understand the culture and, they turned over as a result from partly my management style, I would suppose. I have a question though. That book, did it say why the colder climates are more task oriented versus relationship oriented? Do you remember?
I don't believe it really talked about why that was in particular, but just that it was, and gave some examples of just the way that the cultures interacted and what to kind of expect, time orientation, when we task orientation, when somebody's not there, you know, 2 o'clock, my wife, who's from Colombia, is amazed. She just moved to the United States 6 months ago. And, when we have a get together, 2 o'clock, and my family will be calling, "Hey, we're a little late. We're going to be there at like 2:04." Okay. and she's like, "They're not late, right? I'm always going, 'Hey, when's the event start?' This afternoon sometime. We're not quite sure."
You might have identified something with my own marriage here, Bill. With my wife from Indonesia, you might have just put your finger on it here. It took me 15 plus years to figure this one out.
Well, I'll be happy to send you the book. So I think it's a short little book, but it's a great one for any of those who are looking to build overseas teams. But I do want to go back to this, something you said. You don't really think there's much of a difference between a local team and a remote team, except the cultural differences. But why do so many people think that it's so much different or so difficult? Because I hear this all the time. Like, I need somebody. I mean, I have my own idea, but I'd be curious to know what you're thinking. Like, why is this a problem for people?
They're concerned about security. And my answer is, what's the difference? You have a virtual person in the US or a virtual person in India. You need to have the same kind of security concerns, in my opinion. How is that any different? We're dealing with people at the end of the day. So I think also, like, if you're a firm that's maybe not used to doing things remotely, then that's probably a valid concern. Then it doesn't matter if they're offshore or onshore. The move from having someone in office versus remote, that's probably going to be a bigger shift for you. But if you're already a remote team, sometimes they're concerned maybe about language. So that's something else that comes to mind. What are their clients going to think sometimes, which, again, is for me, it's a non-issue. If the work is done well, most people are really not going to care where it's being done from. So things like that is what I often see come up as roadblocks in their mind.
What I find interesting that most people, and I'm not sure the way it is in Canada, but the insurance system in the US for general liability, if you want to understand where the real risk lies, and people say, "Oh, are they going to steal my data?" And how many clients do you actually have them working on? Like maybe 6, 10, I don't know, maybe at the most 15 or 20, depending on how big they are. So you got a guy who's working for 6 months to get, maybe 20, social security numbers. And then what are you going to do with them? You can go on the dark web and buy 1,000 of them in an afternoon. And so, but going back to the insurance companies, if you want to understand where the real risk lies, most insurance policies will cover contractors, but actually not cover your employees for theft. And most people aren't aware of that. Or if they do cover them, they're covered at a much lower level than they would external people. So if you want to understand where the real risk lies, talk to your insurance broker, because they've already run all the data. They understand, because if you're in the accounting industry, you should know the fraud triangle, right? And what is the fraud triangle? Pressure, rationalization, and opportunity. And oftentimes people within your own organization have more access, or you'd have more of that opportunity than they might externally. And that often opens you up to more chances. Most people are not stealing, going into the business and thinking, okay, how can I steal from my company? But it just happens over a period of time through that rationalization and that pressure. And then obviously, if you don't have the right checks and balances, which I think is what you were kind of talking about before, is like, it's not much different. I ask people, and they're saying, "Hey, I'm worried about security." I said, "Well, what are your security protocols now?" And then you're like, "Oh, we don't really have any." And you're like, "Well, why would it be any different, right? If you don't have them for here, you need to work on security protocols in general, and then generally they'll be transferable overseas." So just kind of curious, could you And I know I've seen one of your videos. It was about the 7 tips of hiring. Maybe I got that title wrong, but
Yeah.
absolutely excellent video. So, and that's hiring pretty much any team member, local, remote, otherwise. Could you give our audience what's some of that framework in your mind to hire excellent staff?
I think there's two things that when I was running my, and I think it's even harder now, but when I was running my firm, finding people and keeping them was a nightmare. I had no clue what I was doing. I was very naive at the time. When I put out my first job offer, I thought it would be like the easiest thing in the world to find someone. I thought just like people were always looking for jobs and just, would take anything. And I couldn't find people for the life of me. When I did find them, I was practically begging them to join. And when they did join, they would turn over very, very quickly. So that was like the first few years of running my firm was just hiring issues. And the two things that really turned things around for me was first attracting. The first step in your recruitment process is your job offer, the job posting. And that's what everybody sees first for the most part. And most job posts are incredibly generic. So if you're looking for a bookkeeper, you say, our firm is looking for a bookkeeper who can do monthly reconciliations and sales tax filings and, review general ledger, et cetera, et cetera. It's just like a list of tasks. And that's not going to get anybody's attention. So we need to treat our job posting as a sales document. And, your recruitment process is just a sales process at the end of the day. We need to convince people to join you. We need to get them excited. So, we have to have, and there's somewhere on my blog, I have a template that people can find for like, if they search for like staff accounting job description or something like that. I have a template where they could just fill in the blanks, and that template alone is miles better than what most firms are putting out there. So the first step is really, we need to convince people, and that convincing starts at the job posting. The second thing is, how are we treating these interviews? A lot of us are really looking at skill level. Can they do a tax return? Can they do a bank reconciliation? Can they put together a financial statement? They're looking at skill. But most people that aren't working out aren't turning over or, leaving, or, they're low performer, not because they don't have the skill, but because they don't have the proper attitudes to succeed in the organization, right? They are perhaps self-centered and are not humble. They are not problem solvers. They're not coachable. So you're constantly repeating the same thing over and over again to them. So when I shifted my interview process and the recruitment process as a whole to test for the key attitudes that I needed for people to succeed in the organization, retention, like finding people and retaining people, is like the least of my concerns right now at Future Firm. I'd say it's primarily due to those two things. There's other things that go into it, but those are the two big things. Whereas with Zen Accounting, my previous firm, those are the things I got completely wrong. And that's why I couldn't find people, and that's why I couldn't keep people. So these are the two big things that I integrate into our recruitment process.
That's awesome. I think that one of the things that you mentioned in your video that I like, and maybe I'll get this wrong, is it 89% of people that are failing in their jobs? Did I get that statistic right?
Yeah, that's like a study. I don't know if, that is from a couple years ago, that study from Leadership IQ. There's a book called Hiring for Attitude, which really taught me on how to hire for attitude instead of hiring for skill. So yeah, we have a skill test. Like there's a couple other things that go into our recruitment process as well. We have skill tests, and we have these, before we go into the interview itself, we have like a screening process that's a little bit automated. So there are some steps to the process, but the two major steps are, we have to get the interview right. We're asking the right questions to identify the critical attitudes required for success in the organization. And we need to attract people, which really starts at the job posting.
To go back to that, 89% of the people that are failing not because of lack of skill, but because of attitude about their job. Or there was two things, I think, if I get that right. They were bad attitude about their job or the way they approach work. But
it was
that was
89%. Yeah, just don't have the attitudes required to succeed. And so for me, like I identify, I need someone that's humble, someone that's not pointing the fingers, someone that's coachable. So that's someone that could accept feedback and implement it. I often speak to firm owners, say, what do I do with this person? I'm always repeating the same thing over and over again. Well, if you've done everything, if you properly train them and you're communicating the same thing over and over again, they're not coachable. And that person is someone you can't delegate work to. And then the last thing is I need a team of problem solvers so that the problems aren't, I don't want problem bringers, I want problem solvers. So these are the three critical things that every single person on my team has to have.
Fantastic. That's if everybody came to work like that, that would be awesome. The other week I was listening to an Instagram reel and he talked about the 1-3-1, bring me one problem, bring me 3 solutions and 1 recommendation. And I think you talked about problem solvers. That's a formula that I've been teaching my team that I really love, that helps them to really be thinking about not just even one solution, but multiple solutions so they can see multiple different avenues and ways forward.
I like that.
So what do you see kind of on the tech horizon for your team? Is there anything that's out there? I mean, obviously there's AI, but different variations and flavors of that. Anything that's really sparking your interest now? Because I'm curious to know how you're seeing this for the future for your team and for your business.
I think AI is really the big one. I don't think there's anything else on my mind that really comes to mind right now. I think it's just about, I've always been someone that kind of jumps into something rather than maybe thinks it through too much. Right. So I kind of jumped into, okay, let me try this with AI. Let me try that. Like my podcast, for instance, that's AI generated voice. And most people can't tell the difference. So I just tested it out. I launched it and I saw, I announced it on my podcast a year ago. What do you think about this? This is not my real voice. Do you care? Do you not care? Send me an email. I think we're at the stage right now where you have to try these different things out, trying different things with ChatGPT, trying different things with these different apps, not necessarily investing a whole ton of time, but I think we have to make incremental, we have to try things incrementally. It reminds me a lot when I got into the cloud accounting game over 10 years ago, when I was one of the first ones to do it. And, we developed a reputation in the space. It was easier to attract clients because they wanted that new kind of experience. We had an edge. And I see the same thing kind of playing out right now, where we're all trying to figure out how we're going to use this. And there's going to be a select few that do start utilizing this in a way that improves the customer experience, and they're going to develop their edge. So we're kind of at that stage right now. So I think it's worth it to play around with it a little bit. Otherwise, I tend to be the person that says I think there's an overemphasis on the importance of technology for creating a great business. I see a lot of firm owners that are very distracted by technology when they don't have the fundamentals right. If you have terrible pricing, you're the bottleneck of your business, you just have a bad foundation in place. There's no amount of technology or apps out there that are going to solve your situation. It's not going to take you from an 80-hour work week to a 40-hour work week just by putting in more technology and apps. So I'm a big believer on let's get the business model right, and then let's implement technology into it to further streamline it.
I love that, because one thing you mentioned there is bottlenecks. There's a book that I read a long time ago. It's actually probably 35 years old now. It's called The Goal by Eli Goldratt. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before, but it talks about the theory of constraints and the bottleneck principles. And so many times as firm owners or business owners, we want to complain about all these other things, but we're often the bottleneck, and we want more from our business. We need to get more from us. We need to expand the bottleneck, and basically by changing, revamping, doing whatever we need to do to alleviate that bottleneck. So I appreciate that. That kind of goes to my next question is what is the one mindset or maybe few things that you see from firm owners, business owners, doesn't even have to be in the accounting space, that you really feel holds them back from being successful? What is that mental model that people need to change?
I think it's probably the thing that held me back in my firm as well. And I think it's maybe particular among the accounting firm owners out there, because we've been trained to basically achieve perfection, right? Like everything always has to balance and everything has to be perfect, right? And that's just how we've been trained. And I think a lot of the time, getting work off our plate, I think the reason why we deal with bottlenecks is because we hold on to too much and we have a hard time letting go. And certainly I think I was better than most, but it was still one of my biggest problems when I was running my firm. And it's still something that I'm trying to get better at each day. But I think the mental shift that we need to make is that perfection is not always needed. There are times where we want to be pretty precise, and there are other times where good enough is good enough. And that's something that I've gotten comfortable with over the years, to kind of like, if my team has the training and they have the processes that have been documented, and to just let them run with it and do it the way that they feel it should be done. In almost all cases, it's going to be appropriate. So I think that's the big mental shift to take, especially if we're trying to remove ourselves from a bottleneck position, is learning to let go, learning that everything doesn't have to be perfect.
Awesome advice. So as we kind of wrap up here, is there anything, I'm curious, because I'm an avid reader. What are you reading? What are you learning about right now?
What am I learning about? Well, I've been deep into that AI clone, that AI cloning. So I've been just playing around with, not necessarily reading, but I've been experimenting with, training an AI model to interact like you would interact, and trying to get it to communicate how you would communicate in certain situations. So that's kind of what I've been playing around with, and it's just tinkering, it's really just tinkering.
On the AI side, I think AI agents for 2025 are going to be really huge. And so that's one of the things that I'm excited about. It's amazing. We're working on a couple projects right now where we're going to be using AI agents to basically double check and iterate the process, rather than just zero shot prompting, which is what a lot of people are using these days, but being able to utilize those AI agents to come in and make the process even better, and to get a product out that's just amazing.
I think that's awesome. A pretty cool aspect of what you're doing, and definitely needed. It's not something I have experience with, but I'll maybe leave that to you.
Well, I don't have the chatbot experience either, so I'll have to come to you on that. But I don't know if anybody really wants to build a Bill bot. So right, that's probably not high on anybody's list. Any of my team members are like, oh, we've had enough of Bill. We don't want another one. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it, Ryan. It's been awesome to connect with you. Appreciate all of your insights and sharing your wisdom with us. Where can people find out more about you and about Future Firm?
Yeah, so thank you very much for having me, Bill. And the best place to follow along is going to futurefirm.co/newsletter. I have about 10,000 readers on my email list, where it's a free email, just tips, tricks, and content that's going to help you with your firm. And that's our most popular resource. And you could shoot me an email as well at ryan@futurefirm.co if you have any questions.
Well, thanks again for being on the show, Ryan. Really appreciate it. And from Beyond the Office, look forward to seeing you next time.